وعلى آله. أوقدت في قلبي هواك، أوقدت في قلبي هواك، وقلت لي إياك تبوح، أم كيف لي أعشاق سواك، وأنت لي جسم وروح. الله 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 الله، لا إله إلا الله. الله الله محمد رسول الله. لما بدا منك القبول حبيبي، لما بدا منك القبول، خرجت من سجن الأسى، وزج بي عين الوصول، وصرت بي كمدنسا. الله 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 الله، لا إله إلا الله. الله الله محمد رسول الله. ولست من قلبي تزول، ولست من قلبي تزول، بين الصباح والمساء النظر فيك يا جميل، نعيش بها عيشا رغاد. الله 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 الله، لا إله إلا الله. الله الله محمد رسول الله. أنت المحاج والدليل، أنت محاج والدليل، من ذا يطيق عنك البعاد، يا راحة القلب العليل، فيك اجتمع كل المراد. الله 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 الله، لا إله إلا الله. الله الله محمد الله. شرب شرب أهل الصفا. الله الله، ترى العجائب، ترى العجائب مع رجال المعرفة. الله الله، والوقت طيب، والوقت طيب، وجدتهم أهل الغرام. الله الله، وهم في حضرة، وهم في حضرة، عيونهم مدبلة. الله الله، وجوههم صفرة، وجوههم صفرة، قلت لهم ندخل حماكم. الله الله، يا ذا الموالي، ذا الموالي، قالوا هل تقبل شرطنا. الله الله، والشرط غالي، والشرط غالي، شرب شرب أهل الصفا. الله الله، عجائب، ترى العجائب مع رجال المعرفة. الله الله، والوقت طيب، طيب، تصبر على هذا الهوى. الله الله، 70 ليلة بعين ليلى تصبر على هذا الغرام. الله الله طول الليالي طول الليالي ترجع سبيكة من ذهب. الله الله يا من عرفنا أن عرفنا تشرب كؤوس الحنظلي. الله الله ولمر يحلى مر يحلى شرب أهل الصفا. الله الله جايب ترى العجايب مع رجال المعرفة. الله الله والوقت طيب وقت طيب يا عين الرحمة محمد يا عين الرحمة محمد عين الرحمة سيد حمد صلى الله عليك سيدي. أنتم فروضي ونفلي أنتم حديثي وشغلي يا قبلتي في صلاتي إذا وقفت أصلي. يا عين الرحمة محمد يا عين الرحمة محمد يا عين الرحمة سيد حمد صلى الله كسيدي. جمالكم نصب عيني إليه وجهت كلي وسركم في ضميري والقلب طور تجلي. يا عين الرحمة محمد عين الرحمة محمد يا عين الرحمة سيد حمد صلى الله عليك. تيانست في الحي نارا ليلا فبشرت أهلي قلتم كثوا فلعلي أجد هدايا لعلي. يا عين الرحمة محمد يا عين الرحمة محمد الرحمة سيد حمد صلى الله عليك وجهه فاق البدورا زاده المولى سرورا. وجهه فاق البدورا زاده المولى سرورا. وجهه فاق البدورا زاده المولى سرورا. قد بدا في الكون نورا قبل خلق الله محمد. يا عين الرحمة محمد عين الرحمة محمد يا عين الرحمة سيد حمد صلى الله عليك سيدي. نادوت منها فكانت نار المكلم قبلي نوديت منها جهارا ردوا ليالي وصلي. يا عين الرحمة محمد رحمة محمد يا عين رحمة سيد حمد صلى الله عليك سيدي. حتى إذا ما تدانى الميقات في جعم شملي صارت جبالي دكا من هيبة المتجلي يا عين الرحمة محمد رحمة محمد يا عين الرحمة سيد حمد صلى الله عليك سيد ولا حسار خفي يدريه من كان مثلي وسرت موسى زماني ماذا صاب عطي كلي يا عين الرحمة محمد يا عين الرحمة محمد رحمة سيد حمد صلى الله عليك سيف الموت فيه حياتي وفي حياتي قتلي أنا الفقير المعنى رق لي حالي وذلي يا عين الرحمة محمد يا عين الرحمة محمد إن الرحمة سيد حمد صلى الله عليك دي كل من سار المقام فالنبي رد السلام يعرف الخلق تماما أبشروا زوار محمد يا عين الرحمة محمد يا عين الرحمة محمد رحمة سيد حمد صلى الله عليك سيدي اللهم صل وسلم وبارك عليه وعلى آله صلوا عليه.
Bismillah. So just before we start, there should be an updated outline that was posted to the app that has the updated bullet points for this session, inshallah ta'ala. Session number 4. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم أجمعين. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. Alhamdulillah, that welcome to those who have come for today's sessions. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq in this endeavor and open up the doors of understanding, whereby which then we that are able to put into practice this blessed knowledge that is so important for the human being. When we speak about beneficial knowledge, is that this is the essence and the epitome of beneficial knowledge, this blessed knowledge that we're studying from this great work, Iḥyā Ulūm of Hujjat al-Islam, al-Imam al-Ghazali. And as it has been said, and we repeat these things to remind ourselves of the importance of it. لو بعث الله الموتى لما أوصى الأحياء إلا بما في الإحياء. Were Allah Ta'ala to resurrect the deceased, people have died, and they have moved into the intermediary realm, and they've seen the realities of the realm of the grave. They would find is that their advice would be to the people who are still in the world: read the Iḥyā Ulūm. Read, study, and put into practice the Iḥyā Ulūm. In other words, is that this is what is going to prepare us for ultimate reality, which is the meeting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and transitioning from this world into the next. And so, alhamdulillah, this book, book 21, as we stated last night, but we'll just repeat very briefly for those who were not here, is right at the heart of the Iḥyā, and it comes at the first part of what is called the Rubu' al-Muhlikat, the quarter on destructive vices. And Ustad Amjad also mentioned this, but book 21 and book 22 are very general in nature. These are the two foundational works that are going to help us understand the remaining 8 books in the third quarter and then the 10 books in the fourth quarter. And so now it is this point where in Imam al-Ghazali's conception, his unique conception of ilm tariq al-akhirah, the knowledge, the science of the path to the hereafter, is that now that it's all about the heart. He's talked about already in the first 10 books, about belief in prayer and fasting and the rest of the acts of worship. He has spoken about and discussed in great detail in the second quarter everything that it is that we need in relation to human interactions and all of the other topics that he discusses there. Now, from this point on, these next 20 books all relate to the heart. And as he said here, what he wants us to know is we need to know about the sifat of the qalb wa ahwaluh. The sifat are the traits of the heart and its ahwal, its various states. And this is a science in and of itself. This is not just something we're pulling from thin air. This is a science. And just as we have Iman, we have Islam, and we also have Ihsan. And then Iman, throughout history, developed into a science that is studied. Islam, throughout history, developed into a science that is studied. And likewise, this science, the science of Ihsan, this is essentially what we're studying. It is a science. I mean, what is meant by the word science here is, it is a systematized form of knowledge that we learn. And it has a beginning and it has an end. And the great scholars of this science have laid it down for us so that here we are, this many years later, that we have access to it. And alhamdulillah, that Imam Ghazali was one of the greatest authors, if not the greatest author of all, in this blessed science of Ihsan, or you could call it Tasawwuf. So in the first session, the first session was more introductory last night, talking about the centrality of the heart. But then the point of session 2, which is the second session last night, and session 3, which was the first session for today, was to start to uncover the inner reality of the human being. These are the things that you and I want to know about the inner reality of the human being. In other words, is that just as there's things that we want to know about our physical body for certain reasons, there's likewise things that we want to know about our internal reality. And this is the starting point. You go in more and more and more and more depth as you progress in the spiritual path. This is the starting point, but then we go in more depth over an extended period of time. And what we're trying to do here is to give a basic knowledge based upon what Imam al-Ghazali mentions here. And this is what he says here. He's giving us what we need to know. The basic understanding of it is all that we really need. What's more important is what we do with it and how we use it. So I'm going to repeat because there was a lot of terms that were thrown at you yesterday. I'm going to repeat in a more basic way what was mentioned yesterday. And this is, I'm going to describe in words what would normally be a diagram on paper, the following. And we're going to focus here only on 4 terms. I'm not going to go into a lot of the details that I went into yesterday because that could get confusing. And we know that a part of the inner reality of the human being is composite, just as our physical body is composite, i.e. composed of parts. Or when it comes to the internal reality of the human being, you could say different aspects or of it. And the most important ones that we need to know about are the words qalb, ruh, nafs, and aql. The first 3 are Quranic terms. The last one is mentioned in verbal form in the book of Allah Ta'ala. One way of understanding this, and again, you will find different ways. This is only meant to help us understand, is that to imagine the heart in the middle. Okay? The heart is in the middle. And the heart on one hand is connected to the nafs. So imagine a circle and then another circle where there's overlap between the nafs, which is here, and the heart, which is here. And then on the other side, you have the ruh. So that circle is also going into the circle of the heart. So you have the heart in the middle, the qalb. You have the nafs on one side, you have the ruh on the other. Now imagine, is that a line right through the middle of the heart. And on this side is the material world. On this side is the immaterial world of the unseen. So you have the heart in the middle, the qalb, the nafs on one side, and you have the ruh. And then imagine that the aql is looking down over the heart. The heart is the battleground where all spiritual struggle takes place. The heart is the battleground. This is where it's all taking place. The various influences of the nafs, of the ruh. And part of last session was when we talked about the inner reality of the human being, we also have these other what are called faculties. Fancy word that just points to this reality that's in us. And one of them being one of the faculty of desire, the other being the faculty of anger. And as was previously mentioned, both of which were created for wisdom that relates to human survival, but also human flourishing. But those same faculties can be a means for us to attain closeness to Allah, can also be the source of our destruction. But we don't want to complicate things further right now. Now, this model that I'm mentioning to you now, or this verbal diagram, if you will, we're going to come back to this again in the session at Asr, when we talk about decision making. And we're going to go into a little bit more detail of every step along the way and what happens whenever we do voluntary actions, i.e. actions that we could be taken into account for, as opposed to reactions. And this will again become important. So right in the middle, you have the qalb, the heart. You have the nafs on one side, you have the ruh on the other, and then you have the aql overseeing this. And then the tension, because we are made out of spirit and clay and have the opportunity to rise to the degree of the highest heavenly angels, or that fall to the lowest of the low, such that we are worse than animals. This is precisely what you and I experience every single day of our lives from morning to evening. And true religion, as opposed to pseudo-religion, forces you to embrace the greatest jihad of all, the greatest war of all, the greatest battle of all, the greatest struggle of all, which is the perennial struggle of the human being with his or her own self. And our Prophet taught us this. Our worst enemy, and he called it an enemy, is our own nafs, because your nafs is you, which is between our two sides. This is directly from the teachings of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and absolutely necessary not only for our own individual spiritual growth, but for everything that we want to happen within our own lives, family, community, and extension to the entire ummah and the world. So there's realities to the human being. And what Imam al-Ghazali wants to expose, this is why he titles the book The Ajaib of the Qalb, because it's so wondrous. And if human anatomy is wondrous, which it is, if the world in which we live is wondrous, which it is, the world of the heart is even more wondrous. Allah. Wonders, ajaib, at the level. And everything he's talking about is just the beginning. If we would fast forward and see at the very end, the realized saints, the awliya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what are they experiencing? What are they witnessing? What are they feeling in their hearts? And feelings, a more modern way of referring to, but what are they experiencing and witnessing? What is coming to their noble hearts? What does it mean to receive awadid? What does it mean to receive ilham? What does it mean to receive some form of unveiling? What does it mean to witness things that Allah Ta'ala has given the human being an ability to witness? What is the precious nature of these very powerful experiences that they have in this dhawq and this spiritual tasting? The only person who knows it knows it. And this is why believing that this is possible is a station in and of itself. That if Allah blesses someone to love the awliya and to cling to their coattails and to spend time with them and to serve them and to be near them and to benefit from them, it is the greatest way for us to move up to the degree of ilm al-yaqeen, to ayn al-yaqeen rather. And it's almost as we're on the verge of that second degree of certitude when we're with these special people, even though that it might not actually be our state because of what we're witnessing from them. And the amazing thing is, in traditional societies, and still to this day, when you go to visit Muslim societies, despite many dimensions of their dysfunctionality, that this sometimes in certain places is still intact. It's still accessible. And this is why we should do sacred travel and spend our time wisely. And yes, occasionally if you need to go and relax, that's fine. But the best way is to really spend your time wisely and go into these sacred cities and these sacred places and spend time with the people of Allah. And you'll come away oftentimes not even with the ability to articulate what you experience or how you experience, but it will just feel like you witnessed ajaib and wonders. And fi'lan, what you're really witnessing are people that Allah Jalla Jalaluhu has taken over their affairs. The wali is called the wali, لِنَّ اللَّهَ تَوَلَّى أَمْرَهُ. Allah has taken over his or her affairs, because there's a lot of female awliya that are out there. And when you spend time with them, you start to just see these ajaib and these wonders of taysir and divine facilitation, these wonders of what it means to connect to them. I'll just give you a very brief example. That I believe one of her grandchildren might even be with us in this room, but our dear friend Sheikh Abdul Karim Yahya, his blessed mother, rahimahullah, passed away recently, according to the Hijri calendar, at the age of 97. And she wanted, and she spent many years of her life in the blessed city of Tarim, and then came back for many years to the United States of America, but always had that wanted her end of her life to be in the blessed city of Tarim. And subhanAllah, all these years passed, and then that only recently, within the past 2.5 weeks or whatever it was, Sheikh Abdul Karim that moved his family back, including his mother, to Tarim, and then within 2.5 weeks, even though outwardly she seemed to be very healthy and nothing was wrong, passes away. And normally when you speak about people passing, it's a sad thing. But in this instance, it's actually a joyous occasion for many reasons, without doubt, the sorrow of losing a loved one. I felt something similar when my own father passed away, when I witnessed the wonders of what it means to connect to the people of Allah Ta'ala, just to have someone like my father die upon Islam and be buried in an all-Muslim grave, and enough to be able to wash him and to be able to perform the services. The joy of just having that happen, despite the difficulties of losing someone like your father. The same thing here is, at 97 years old, how many times outwardly could she have passed away or something would have gone wrong, and just right at the right time when she's seemingly still healthy goes, and this is where she passes away. But that is the blessing of connecting to the people of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. This is just one of many, many examples. Is that when you connect to them, you see things like this in your life and those that are around you over and over again, over and over again, over and over again. This is a tangent only to say is that the wonders of the heart are many. This is why Imam al-Ghazali titled this book. What he's going to focus on is the basic knowledge that we need to know so that we can then travel the path. In the last session, Ustad Amjad quoted that part here where it's talking about the safar ila Allah, traveling, the journey to Allah. This is what should preoccupy our minds from the morning to the evening. This should be the most important thing that we think about. Everything that we do, we only do it for the sake of Allah. Even in relation to our service of the ummah and humanity, it's for Allah. Because Allah wants us to be like this. But ultimately, it's all about our journey to Allah Ta'ala, and that by submitting to Him, doing what He wants us to do here on earth in both its inward and outward dimensions. So now we're going to move on in this session. This is session 4, where we're going to treat another topic. And this is where Imam al-Ghazali speaks on a chapter called the Bayan Khasiyati Qalb al-Insan, where he's going to talk about the unique nature of man. And of course, it goes without saying, when we talk about man, that includes both genders, the unique nature of the human being. So there's a khasiyah, there's something unique, there's something special about insan, about humankind, about mankind, about the human being, in which we are different from everything else that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created. And He wants us to know this. So this dovetails off of this discussion of the internal reality of the human being. And essentially what he says here is, there are many ways that we are similar to other kingdoms that Allah has created. We share many traits with animals. We share even some things with plants. Plants grow, human beings grow. That animals have eyes, we have eyes, and so forth and so on. Animals can get angry, we can get angry. So there's things we share with animals, there's things that we share with plants, and then there's things that we even share with the mineral kingdom, and then all atoms in the universe. Everything in the world is ultimately made of the same material. That everything is made of the same elements, hydrogen and helium and so forth and so on. Everything ultimately in the world, including the stars, is made of the same material. So there's things that we share in common with everything in creation, and then there's, and so forth and so on, until you get to the various kingdoms up to the animal kingdom that are the most similar to, but then there's something special about the human being that differentiates us. And this is what he wants to lay bare for us and to teach us. So he says, فَلْنَذْكُرْ مَا يَخْتَصْ بِهِ قَلْبُ الْإِنسَانِ. He's going to focus here on that what makes the heart of the human being special. وَلِأَجْلِهِ عَظَمَ وَشَرُفَ. And it is for this reason, عَظَمَ شَرَفَهُ, is that we have such a noble rank with Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. وَاسْتَأْهَلَ الْقُرْبَ مِنَ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى. And it is through these qualities is that human beings are prepared for proximity and closeness to Allah Ta'ala. He says, and it gets back to two things. It's not too complicated. Ilm and irada. Ilm, of course, is knowledge. Irada is will. Ilm and irada. This is what makes us special. He says, Amma al-ilm, he's going to explain now the knowledge component. هو العلم بالأمور الدنيوية والأخروية والحقائق العقلية. This spiritual, by knowledge is meant that knowledge which deals with the things of this world and the world to come, and with intellectual realities. Okay, so you and I can have knowledge of affairs, of things in this world and in the hereafter. Animals are not aware of the future. Animals don't know that there's going to be Judgment Day. Animals that might remember the way they were treated in the past and so forth and then adjust, but they're not aware in the sense of the future of things, of the hereafter. They know nothing of the hereafter. The world for them is the here and now. And when we talk about the plant kingdom, even more so, that we don't think of the plant kingdom as having idrak, although Allah Ta'ala could make a plant speak if He wanted to. Allah does whatever He wants. Just as Allah Ta'ala could make an animal speak. Is that how many instances of the seerah did animals speak to the Prophet ﷺ and would complain to him about the way they were treated, for instance, by their owners? And that Sayyidina Sulaiman understood the mantiq al-tayr, the speech of birds, and so forth. And hakada. So that Allah Ta'ala could unveil for us that how other things in His creation communicate. But the reality is only the human being truly understands the things of this world and in the hereafter in a more complicated, higher sense. But wal-haqa'iq al-aqliyah, intellectual realities. This is unique to the human being. First principles and logic. Animals don't have logic. They don't think like we think. They don't have first principles. And then he goes into some examples of those where we don't need to, we can just keep it very general, and that suffices at this point, is the ability to use our intellect so that you and I can come to a conclusion that something is true or not true, to make a decision, to think things through. This is unique to the human being. So this is what he says about ilm. But then he also says, وَأَمَّا الْإِرَادَةِ فإنه إذا أدرك بالعقل عاقبة وترك صرح فيه انبعث من ذاته شوق إلى جهة المصلحة. Now regarding the will, when a man perceives by his intellect the consequences of an act and the best way to do something, there is aroused within his self a desire for the best way, the advantageous way, a desire to exert himself in the means to attain it, and also the will to this end. Okay, so we as human beings, when we go through the process of thinking about something, and you come to the conclusion that thing is necessary. So let's just say that the heater's shut off, God forbid, I probably shouldn't say that. And then we're all like really cold. And then all of a sudden we all start thinking, oh my goodness, I'm cold now, and it's going to get even colder. Snow is in the forecast, and that's going to make it even colder. Oh, I have a jacket in my car. Oh my God, I left it at the hotel that I'm staying at. So you start making a plan. And then what that does is it triggers your will to actually go get the jacket to stay warm, or another layer, or socks, or whatever, something, to a blanket or something. So the whole point is that you go through that intellectual process, and this is a lay example, but then what happens as a result of thinking about it, and then you know that that's what's best for you to keep yourself warm, and then your will sets in to go do that very thing. And so it's from here that we start to realize, and this is a side point, is that the fadail al-a'mal, while they're so important, why is it so important to talk about the merit, the reward of doing certain sacred acts? And why did our Prophet ﷺ tell us that so many sacred acts have such a reward? Because when we believe in him and we understand that, wow, that's what I'm going to get as a result, or if I do this, this is what would happen if I would die, or if I say this, this is what I'm going to receive. This is something that you desire, you realize that's good for you. So what happens? Your will then follows, and it sets in based upon that knowledge that you have that comes from your intellect's ability to that understand what is being said to it. So hakada, this is unique to the human being, is that our will comes as a result of what it is that we know, as opposed to just reactions. Animals function off of instinct. Human beings should actually think things through. This is why we can actually be more animal-like, in that we in and of ourselves are not excused when we act like animals. Animals are excused because they're animals. Human beings, because we're supposed to be different, are required to think things through. And then he takes us even further. Okay, so when we know that there's something that we know is good for us, we long for it, there's a desire for it, and then we set out to do it. But it is also can happen in relation to the human being, is that there might be something that we actually don't want to do, but the intellect comes to the conclusion that it's something that we should do, and even though we don't want to do it, we go ahead and do it. So some type of difficult test that someone has to do, a colonoscopy or an endoscopy or something. It's not something someone wants to do. It's a horrible process to go through. But certain things that have happened and you're worried about certain things, and you need to check yourself out to see if you need treatment. No one wants to do that, but you know with your intellect, when you speak to a physician that tells you, oh, these are the symptoms that you saw, this is really what you should do in order to protect yourself to extend your life. So even though in and of yourself, you don't want to do that thing, your intellect knows that this tells you this is what is good for you, so you can even have will to do things that are distasteful to you. And this is really important. And this is something unique to the human being. Animals don't have this. There's just reactions based on instinct. Human beings can even do things, and when he mentioned this example, he's opening up the door for us to understand this blessed principle of spiritual struggle, which is at the very heart of the spiritual path, embracing spiritual struggle. And remember that we said last night, true religion teaches you to embrace spiritual struggle. It's supposed to be hard. It's not supposed to be easy. This is the dunya. This is the world. We have to confront ourselves. We have to work on ourselves if that we want to rise up in degrees of closest to Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. So we have ilm, and then we have irada, knowledge, and then we have will. Now, one of the things that he then goes on to say, and he speaks in a little bit more detail here about knowledge. And there are many different degrees that someone can reach in relation to knowledge. And for the sake of time and brevity, I'll just mention here the English passage and then give a brief commentary. So he says here that But in this stage, there are innumerable degrees of contrast among men. And of course, when he says men here, that means both genders, in the abundance of paucity of knowledge, in the dignity of knowledge or sordidness, and in the way of attaining it. So now he's speaking about knowledge, and he's saying that there are innumerable degrees in relation to human beings in terms of how much they know or how little they know, or in relation to the noble nature of what they know or the lowliness of what they know, and then how they come to know what it is that they know. So just think about all the different people on earth and all the different things that people know and how they come to know what it is that they know. There's that a huge difference between people. But the greatest of all of those who know are the prophets. Now, we might all in this room say that we believe that. But sometimes our actions belie our belief in that. And most Muslims have to believe that. But to what degree do we actually really live by that in our own lives and in relation to our pursuits and what it is that we do? So he has this beautiful passage here where he says, the highest rank, yani, in relation to knowledge, in terms of its amount, in terms of its honor, in terms of how that it's received, is that of the prophets. The highest rank of Allah. وَأَقْصَى الرُّتُبِ رُتْبَةَ النَّبِيِّ, the rank of a prophet. الَّذِي تَنْكَشِفَ لَهُ كُلُّ الْحَقَائِقِ, the prophet is the one whom that realities are revealed to him. No one knows true reality like the prophets. And even amongst them, there are degrees that leading up to the highest degree of all, which is that of our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. No one understands reality like the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. No one is more aware of reality than the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. No one knows more about the creation of the heavens and the earth and the world up until human beings, and then of all different everything that relates to human beings and everything that's going to happen in the hereafter than the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. No one knows how to draw closer to Allah more than the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and on and on and on. And again, it's important to remind ourselves of this. We should all know this, but realities are unveiled for them. And when they're unveiled for them, is that this does not happen by the process of acquisition, nor after difficulty. You and I struggle to acquire knowledge. We have to go through a process that is difficult in order to come to know. Al-ilmu bit-ta'allum, our Prophet taught. Knowledge is through struggling to learn such that you then come to know. And people learn at different paces. There's different abilities that people have to learn. But the highest degree is that of a Prophet, who Allah Ta'ala reveals to him بِكَشْفٍ إِلَهِ فِي أَسْرَعِ الْوَقْتِ, in the shortest possible time. And sometimes this helps us to read some of the stories, and usually these are autobiographical because they have to be, because they're experiences. Most awliya are not permitted to speak about what it is that they experience and how they received the fath and the opening that they received. There's very few accounts of this in Islamic history, but the few that have been permitted are so rich. They're windows for us into understanding what it could have potentially been like, although you're never going to ever know, for a prophet to receive revelation in what it is that they come to know when they receive that revelation. And for our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this is studied in the science of ulum al-Quran. There are 7 different types of revelation, or you can even say degrees of revelation, that he received sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And all categories of revelation are great, and some are greater than others. But this is important, because what we come from, after we know this, what we come away with is the prophets have the greatest knowledge you could possibly have. And this should be what it is that we try to seek We want the knowledge that the prophets have. Now, we'll never truly know what they know, but even if we're given a glimpse, a small bit of this knowledge, this is the greatest sa'ada and felicity for human beings. Now, this does not mean that we don't learn other things. It is perfectly fine and legitimate to learn other types of knowledge for a utilitarian purpose. You need to get a job that you need to provide that a living. That's fine. Nothing wrong with that whatsoever. But don't skew the perspective where you think that this knowledge is superior. Don't skew the perspective and look down upon someone or disparage them because they're spending their time learning sacred knowledge. Put things in its proper place. This has its proper place, and this has its proper place. And the more moving forward as a community that we have the ability to interpret, if you will, or understand other types of knowledge from the lens of revelation that our Prophet Muhammad received, will be to the extent that we get the benefit of that knowledge and we're spared its harms. But if we turn the tables, we will find ourselves in the predicament that we're in right now. And if we don't do something about it, it's going to get worse and worse and worse. Is that there are countless Muslims that are cogs in the wheel of this system that are making it work. And they don't care if your name is a Muslim name or not. If, as Hakim Salim Khan calls them, that you're a martyr of modernity or of post-modernity, they don't care. That they'll happily use you for the profits of their company or whatever it is, that they'll happily use you. And now, I don't mean to put it in that sense, like everything that you do in corporate America is necessarily wrong, but the whole point here is that see it for what it's worth and put it in its proper place. And just look at the nature of our communities. We all know when someone makes a lot of money, how they're treated. When someone has a particular type of profession, how they're treated. And that some people are embarrassed when they're asked, oh, what do you do? Right? Especially if you're in a circle, there's some like elitist type tendencies. What do you do? Oh, you're a housewife? You're a homemaker? Like a more sanitized word for a housewife. You're a homemaker? Oh, you work in that field? Or you do this? Or you do that? And it's like instantly like, oh, who is this person? Right? This is just, not only is it haram, it's despicable. And that Muslims simply shouldn't be like this. And the point here is that this knowledge is the highest knowledge of all. So the highest rank is that of a prophet in relation to all of these aspects in terms of amount of knowledge, in terms of nobility of knowledge, and in terms of how they receive their knowledge. Because in terms of amount, no one is like them. In terms of nobility, this knowledge is the most important knowledge of all because it relates to their relationship with Allah. In terms of how they receive it directly from Allah. Or in some types of revelation through the intermediary of an angel. Okay? So, the knowledge of prophets and then the different ranks of creation. And then what Imam al-Ghazali does after this is something that is really beautiful. So this is the next bullet point. Proximity to Allah and exposing ourselves to His mercy by purification of the soul. And what he does here is he says, وبهذه السعادة يقرب العبد من الله تعالى قربا بالمعنى والحقيقة والصفة. And this translates, it is through this felicity that the human being draws near to Allah in meaning, in reality, and in trait, not in respect to place and distance. In other words, is that our closeness to Allah is directly related to the amount of knowledge that we have and the nobility of that knowledge and how we receive it. So when we talk about closeness to Allah, sometimes it's a very ambiguous concept for us. Like, what does it mean to be close to Allah? It's not a physical closeness. It's a closeness of heart. It's a closeness of Allah giving us certain understandings and experiences of meanings that come to the heart. It's a closeness that relates to knowledge. And so when we talk about closeness, it's a matter of the heart. And so when we understand this, that depending upon the type of knowledge that we have depends upon our relative degree of closeness to Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. And then he goes on to say, the levels up to these various degrees are the manazil, they are the stages or the way stations reached by those journeying towards Allah. And there is no limitation to these stages. The spiritual path has a beginning and it never has an end. Each traveler knows only his own stage to which he has attained on the journey. He knows it, and he knows also that was just ahead of him, but he may believe in it as he believes in the unseen. Even as we believe in prophecy in the prophet and accept his existence as true, while no one but a prophet knows the true nature of prophecy. And even as the embryo knows not the state of the infant, nor the infant the state of the discerning child, and what has been opened up to him of axiomatic knowledge, nor to the discerning child the state of the intelligent man and what he's acquired of a speculative knowledge, so also the intelligent man knows not of what attainments of the grace and mercy of Allah have been unveiled or revealed to the prophets and unveiled to his saints. And then he quotes a verse of the Quran, مَا يَفْتَحِ اللَّهُ لِلنَّاسِ مِنْ رَحْمَةٍ فَلَا مُمْسِكَ لَهَا. This translates, the mercy which Allah grants to humanity, none can withhold. So he's saying here is that there's stages that we go through as human beings. And one of the amazing things about these stages, all of these stages that we go through directly relate to, even in the most outward sense for people, even who don't believe, to various degrees of knowledge that we acquire. As he mentioned here, what do we know when we are in the wombs of our mothers? What do we know when we're 2 and 3 years? What do we remember from that when we're 2 and 3 years old? But then we start to have our first memories. But then we attain that what's called the level of discernment, where we can start making some basic distinctions. And then we reach the first degree where we actually say that we have the first stage of intellect, and then so forth and so on. Then we grow and we mature through experience, and we acquire more and more knowledge and so forth. And this is in the outward sense, but when we also do go through this same process spiritually and religiously. And ultimately, the greatest thing that we can attain as people who are not prophets is the knowledge that Allah Ta'ala has singled out his awliya with. That is the greatest knowledge that we can attain. And learning sacred knowledge is the greatest key for that greatest knowledge. And then understanding all their types of worldly knowledge through the lens of that sacred knowledge, putting it in its proper place, and that acting upon that sacred knowledge in a way that is pleasing to Allah. That is the way to attain this higher knowledge. Because the higher knowledge of unveiling in Imam al-Ghazali went into great detail to give us example after example of this type of knowledge. This is what's called Ulūm al-Mukashafah, the knowledge of unveiling. And it is a knowledge that comes as a fruit of putting this practical knowledge into action. And what happens is you start to get glimpses. But even as you see, like even in examples of like the reflection sessions that we do here, when you exert yourself, it's not something you have to wait for 20 to 30 years. Is that you get insights, you have openings, that even in the process, Allah makes things clear to you. And then there's degrees and different types of disclosure and unveiling. So he then moves on to say is that وَهَذِيَ الرَّحْمَةِ, this mercy that comes from the generosity of Allah in his munificence. He says here, غَيْرُ مَذْنُونٍ بِهَا عَلَى أَحَدٍ, this mercy that we all that are seeking, Allah does not begrudge it to anyone. Now, he doesn't hold it back from anyone. ولكن إنما تظهر في القلوب المتعرضة لنفحات رحمة الله تعالى. This is one of the very important statements of this book. So what is he saying here? In order to really attain these higher degrees of closeness to Allah, to be from the awliya, to experience this knowledge, to move up in these degrees of knowledge, we can only do this by the mercy of Allah. Yes, that we have to act, but it's not the act that bringing this about, it's the mercy of Allah. Just as it's only the mercy of Allah that's going to allow us to enter into paradise. But we have to still do our part. And the mercy comes to those who are doing what he says here. إِنَّمَا تَظْهَرَ فِي الْقُلُوبِ الْمُتَعَرِّضَةِ. The souls, the hearts, that are exposing themselves to the sweet breezes of Allah's mercy. So this is an important word. And if you haven't heard it before, I want you to write it down, either in Arabic or in English. Inshallah, we'll consider that snow is a type of rain, because when snow melts, it turns into water. So inshallah, just as it's hopefully that it's qiyasan ala al-matar, inshallah, du'as are mustajab. And we want to expose ourselves. The great metaphor for rahmah is mercy, is rain rather. Mercy, the great metaphor for mercy is rain. And this is what we're all in need of. What does our Prophet say? Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, hadith narrated by Tabarani. Inna li rabbikum fi ayami dahrikum nafahat. Indeed, your Lord has, in the days of his time, nafahat. A nafha is an instance of feeling like a breeze. Okay, so imagine yourself hot outdoors, and then a cool breeze comes by, and the way internally, like this sense of relief and refreshment by virtue of that sweet breeze that comes by. Is that's a physical thing that you feel. But there's also in the unseen nafahat, sweet breezes of Allah's mercy. So just as you have mawasim, you have mawasim. Just as you have seasons, you have seasons. You have physical seasons, and you have spiritual seasons. And one great example of one of the great aspects of these spiritual seasons, the night that just passed by 2 nights ago, Laylatul Nisf in Sha'ban. This comes directly in narrations of our Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, is the importance of the Laylatul Nisf in Sha'ban. This is one of the greatest times that we can expose ourselves to the sweet breezes of Allah's mercy, and to attain his forgiveness, and to attain great blessing, and to do increased worship. And so what are we doing is that just as outwardly, that if you want to get fresh air, that if you want to get out into the wind, and that want to smell a nice scent, you have to go out and do it. Yani, you expose yourself to it. Likewise, that we have to expose ourselves to the sweet breezes of Allah's mercy. How do we do that? He's going to tell us. But let's just pause on this concept, because this is key. And one of the things that we hope to revive, that in the United States of America, or wherever else someone is coming from, Canada and in the Muslim world, is, as we've learned from our teachers, they have a whole methodology and system that is based upon exposing ourselves to the sweet breezes of Allah Ta'ala's mercy on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, and on a yearly basis. So we call them here munasabat sanawiyah, the yearly occasions. And then the yearly occasions are the things that come on an annual basis. But then there's things that come on a daily basis. And that relates to, for instance, the pre-Fajr awrad that we did. That time is a special time on a daily basis, the last part of the night. It is one of the best times that we can expose ourselves to the sweet breezes of Allah's mercy by doing specific things. Most importantly, tawajjuh, turning to Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala, seeking his help, istighfar, seeking his forgiveness, making dua, supplication, and so forth. And then on a weekly basis, the day of Jummah, which begins actually from the night before, from Maghrib all the way until Maghrib of the actual day of Jummah. This whole time is special. And not to go into too much detail because then we're going to take too much of a tangent. But then on a monthly basis, this also happens. For instance, fasting the 3 days in the middle of the month is a special time that you expose yourself to the sweet breezes of Allah's mercy through doing a particular act. And then on an annual basis, the first night of Rajab, the Laylatul Nisf min Sha'ban, the whole month of Ramadan, that's called the Shahr Nafahat. And those whose hearts are in tune, that are pure and are do what he's going to tell us right now that we need to do, the way that they experience Ramadan is that they wish the entire year would be Ramadan, because they're beyond the difficulties of just not preventing themselves from food and drink. And what we want in this blessed month of Ramadan, because it's close, may Allah Ta'ala bless us in the remaining days of Sha'ban and to prepare us completely, inwardly and outwardly, for the month of Ramadan, which is right around the corner. Inshallah, we hope that this will be from the most blessed of Ramadans in our life and from the ummah of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We want to get beyond just the difficulty of preventing ourselves from food and drink, and the difficulty of having a headache and these types of things, the difficulty of not having, these little pieces of candy and cups of tea and coffee midday to get us through the day, and having our snacks and so forth, where we start to tap into the amazing spiritual nature of this act of worship, engaging the book of Allah Ta'ala, and that resembling the angels and opening up our hearts through the fast to higher meanings that will come to them, inshallah ta'ala, through reflection upon the book of Allah Ta'ala. And one of the quickest ways to spoil the spiritual blessings of the fast is when you start to put food in your mouth when you break your fast. Yes, you have to eat, of course, but the primary meaning of the farha, the happiness of you breaking your fast, is not that you enjoy the food, although that's something you enjoy. No, it's the fact that Allah gave you tawfiq to fast during that day, and you've done it in a way, hopefully, that it's been accepted. That's the primary meaning. The meaning of enjoying the food, that's a given. That's something that goes along with that. But that's the primary meaning. But the whole purpose of fasting is to prepare you for the worship of night, which is standing in prayer. So if you and I just eat as much as we normally eat, or worse yet, more than we normally eat, we're spoiling the spiritual benefits of our fast. Whereas if we cut back and we eat in moderation and with the right intention, when we're standing in prayer at night, we're going to be very happy. We've all done that, where we've eaten too much. And unfortunately, people go all out during Ramadan, and you end up eating different types of desserts and foods that you don't even eat outside of Ramadan. And moderation is important. You don't want to hurt people's feelings and things like that, but moderation. The point is, remember when you're eating that you're going to be standing in prayer very soon. And you're going to be thankful that if you restrained yourself a little bit, because then we're going to have new meanings that come to the heart from exposing ourselves to the sweet breezes of Allah Ta'ala. So Ramadan is the ultimate opportunity of the year to expose ourselves to Allah, the sweet breezes of His mercy. So the point here is, we need to learn how to expose ourselves to the sweet breezes of Allah Ta'ala's mercy on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, and on a yearly basis. And my advice to you would be to do a schedule. Have a daily schedule, a weekly schedule, a monthly schedule, and a yearly schedule. And it's very easy to facilitate all these phones. You could have that on one, I use an iPad for instance, you could have schedule A, daily, schedule B, weekly. And just, you can choose which ones show in the calendar and so forth. And khalas. It's very easy for us. And then you'll get the blessings of that, and set up notifications. You can remind yourself that such and such is coming. And then you'll get the blessing of the years through that. And then what happens is, this is one of the secrets of only living 60 to 70 years, which is the average lifespan of the ummah of our Prophet. Some will live less, some will live more. But being able to attain way more in those 60 to 70 years than other people would have been able to attain in hundreds and hundreds of years. What a blessing. But this is the secret. This is the miftah, the key that opens that up. Now, all of that in reality was a tangent. What Imam al-Ghazali is really wants to teach us here is the following. He says, وَالتَّعَرُّضْ لَهَا. How do you really expose yourself to these nafahat, these sweet breezes of Allah's mercy? بِتَطْهِيرِ الْقَلْبِ. By purifying your heart. So you see what he's doing in book 21? He's setting us up now to roll up our sleeves, because the next book is still, it's hard on the nafs, but from there on out, books 23 to 30, ya Latif, right? They're not easy. He's going to grind us. But if you don't put yourself in a situation where you go through a spiritual boot camp, you're not going to benefit. And so he says, how do we expose ourselves to it? بِتَطْهِيرِ الْقَلْبِ. By purifying our heart, وَتَزْكِيَتِهِ, and disciplining it. مِنَ الْخُبْثَ وَالْخَبَث وَالْكُدُورَ الْحَاصِنَ مِنَ الْأَخْلَاقِ الْمَذْمُومَةِ. And this exposing of oneself to them is done by cleansing and purifying the heart from evil and from the turpidity that comes from a blameworthy character, as will be set forth later. So in other words, remove from your heart all of the destructive vices, all of the diseases of the heart, all of the things that cloud the heart, place rust on it. Ustad Amjad is going to talk about that in the next session, with as the heart as a mirror, all the different things that create this ran and this rust on the heart. Cleanse it, because we're not going to be able to receive these unveilings, these spiritual experiences, these higher degrees of tasting the sweetness of faith, if our hearts are dirty. And this is what they say: if you don't study this science, you will likely die persisting in major sins of the heart, like arrogance. If you don't study this science, you will likely die committing major sins of the heart regularly. This is why this is so important. To cleanse the heart, to actively work on it, to be aware of how we're manipulated by our own selves through our desires and the things that we want, the diseases of the heart that get in the way and block barakah, blessing, rahmah, mercy from coming to us. These things block us. It's in our own benefit to get rid of them. And it's very much in the benefit of other people as well. So he says, this is how we prepare ourselves for this. And then he goes into these beautiful examples of some isharat and indications that point to these meanings that he is referring to. And then he says something here that is very important. كل ذلك إشارة إلى أن أنوار العلوم لم تحتجب عن القلوب لبخل ومنع من جهة المنعم تعالى الله عن البخل والمنع علوا كبيرا ولكن حجبت لخبث وكروت وشغل من جهة القلوب. All of this is an indication that the light of knowledge is not veiled from people's hearts by any stinginess or prohibition on the part of the giver, who is far removed from such acts, but rather it is veiled by the own wickedness, turpidity, and anxiety within the heart. I would have translated that differently. The whole point is that Allah Ta'ala is not withholding from us out of stinginess. Hashahu. That's impossible for him. He doesn't have that trait. His trait is one of generosity. We are the ones that prevent ourselves from receiving Allah's mercy. Allah's mercy is sababa. It is incessantly pouring out, always, in every place and in every time. The problem is our own hearts. Are we there to receive? And what happens is that the heart becomes veiled from receiving these realities of light, mercy, blessing, and so forth and so on, that because of the rust that it acquires on it through sin and because of the various destructive vices that arise therein. And so then he goes on to say, and he quotes a hadith, and this is Musnad of Imam Ahmad, لولا أن الشياطين يحمون على قلوب بني آدم لنظروا إلى ملكوت السماء. Were not to be that there are devils circling the heart of the children of Adam, they would have gazed on the celestial heaven. And so the human being, from all this, it is clear that the special characteristic that is unique to the human being is knowledge and wisdom. And that the most noble kind of knowledge is the knowledge of Allah, of His attributes and His acts. It is through this knowledge that you find the human being's perfection. And in his perfection is his true felicity and worthiness to live near the divine majesty and perfection. The body then is a vehicle for the soul, and the soul is the seat of knowledge. Knowledge is the end destined for the human being and the special characteristic for which he was created. Allahu Akbar. This is what our Prophet was sent to give us. What a blessing. Do you realize, like, we're just in a state of heedlessness? What are we doing with our lives? If you really look at what's available, look what's possible for us. Look what our Prophet wants us to attain. All of his teachings of Iman, Islam, Ihsan are so that we can put them, so we can experience this. And some of this can be experienced here in this world, let alone in the hereafter. This is what's available. This is what is possible for us. That were people only to know, everybody would be a Sadiq. Everybody would be a traveler to Allah wa ta'ala. Were we only to know that what lies ahead, what blessings that we can see, the opportunities that we have. This is the affair in its entirety. And look at the way that the world has gone wrong and convinced people of the opposite of this. But this still exists. And from the blessing of Allah, the great inheritors of the Prophet ﷺ are still alive and can still take us by the hand. And if someone would say, well, how are they going to take everybody in the world by the hand? If people's perspectives change and their priorities change, you would be amazed. You'd be amazed. If you want to see the number of seminaries in the United States of America move from however many exist now, maybe let's just say 10, 15, to 1,500, all you have to do is see a critical mass of the population change their intentions, change their perspective, and you will miraculously see in a very short period of time that number exponentially increase to 1,500 in the shortest period of time possible. Because Allah Ta'ala will provide for those who change their perspective and want to draw near to Him. And similarly, that if people's change, their perspective change, you have a critical mass, 5, 10, 20, 30, 50, 100,000 Muslims plus that genuinely want to draw near to Allah Ta'ala, you will find that Allah Ta'ala brings forth people to take them to Him Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. This is the way that it works. There's no lack of resources, physical or spiritual. Everything is in the hands of Allah Ta'ala. Is it? We don't have to be worried about, that's a tangent. I'm going to keep it spiritual. Khalas. Yani, Allahu Akbar. I mean, this is amazing. Look what we have. Look at what we have. This is so beautiful. This is the reason for which we were created. وَالنَّفْسِ مَحَلَ الْعِلْمِ وَالْعِلْمُ هُوَ مَقْصُودُ الْإِنسَانِ وَخَاصِيَتُهُ. This is what we've been created for. Subhanallah. And just to wrap this up, because I know that we're out of time, that he says here, and he talks about how if we don't use this special quality that we've been given, or better said, we don't allow it to be realized within us, then we've lost what makes us special as human beings. So he says, the horse shares with the donkey the power to carry burdens and is distinguished from it by its own special characteristics of charging and fleeing and beauty of form, and therefore the horse was created for the sake of these special characteristics, the removal of which would bring it to the low rank of the donkey. And then he ties this to the human being. Whoever makes use of all of his members and powers, all of his abilities, all of his limbs, in such a way as to seek their aid in attaining to knowledge and action, is like the angels and is worthy to be joined to them. But whoever spends his energy in following after bodily pleasures and eats as do the animals is brought down to the low depths of the beasts. So he becomes ignorant as an ox, gluttonous as a hog, greedy as a dog or a cat, malevolent as a camel, vain as a leopard, or sly as a fox. Or he may unite all of these and become a rebellious demon. There is not a single one of the bodily members, nor a single sense perception, but that it helps along the path that leads to Allah the Exalted. The totality of man's sa'ada, which is our felicity, lies in making the meeting with Allah the Exalted his aim. What is true sa'ada? Our aim, what should our goal be? The meeting with Allah, such that when we transition from this world into the hereafter, we're ready. And we do so in the best of states. The abode of the world to come, the hereafter, his dwelling place. This present world, his temporary stopping place. The body, his vehicle, and its members, yani our limbs, his servants. So the perceptive part of man dwells in the heart as a king in the midst of his kingdom. وهكذا. And then he goes on to mention a number of beautiful things there, but that suffices. And he mentions a few quotes that points to this reality. The whole point here is this is what we should be living for. This is what we've been created for, so that when we understand this with our intellect, with our aql, what we hope is there'll be inbi'ath. There'll be a motivation that leads to our will. And so it's interesting to note here is that one of the words for the spiritual traveler, of course, is the salik, but it's also the murid. And this relates to irada, which is will. The murid is the one who exercises his or her will to do whatever it is that they can in every single moment throughout their lives to draw near to Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. The murid is the one who exercises their irada, their will, to do everything that he or she can in every single moment throughout their lives to draw near to Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. That is the most exalted thing of all in existence. And don't think when I say that I'm only talking about worship. No, this relates to the whole range of things that we're supposed to be doing, including amr bil ma'ruf wa nahy anil munkar, including giving people their rights, including a long list of other things. So don't think that we mean by that just that remaining recluse and abandoning that all of your social obligations. No, your social obligations are a part of this. But what is our intention behind it? Shaytan. There's a huge difference between someone who is doing it because they feel that they just have to do it, and between someone who's doing it because they've been commanded by Allah to do it, and they see it as one of the greatest means to attain the highest degree of closeness to Allah Tabaraka and attain ma'rifah and knowledge of Him. This is what we should be living for, and if this is the unique nature of the human being, this should be how it is that we spend our lives. May Allah Ta'ala give us understanding and bless us to dedicate ourselves to this. Ya Arhamar Rahimeen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wasallam. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. I apologize for not allowing any time for Q&A. We went a little bit over time.